Well, if you thought we were done with this Can-Am Outlander, so did I, but we're not quite done yet. So if you haven't seen the other videos, this is a 2011 Can-Am Outlander XTP 800. When this first came here, it did not run. Had to replace a couple parts to make a run. Now she runs good. Now we got to do some other stuff. The owner got a hold of me. The owner said you might as well do an oil change on that because we did check it and it was a hair low, not bad, but it was pretty black, so it definitely could use an oil change. But that's not all we're doing. He happened to see I had a parts Can-Am Outlander 650 over here, and he really liked the looks of this radiator relocator kit. So we made a deal. I'm going to throw this on for him. Told him I'd sell him this and install it for 200 bucks. So this should be the last video of the Outlander XTP 800, but it's not going to be the last video of an Outlander XTP 800 because I have one of my own. And here she is. Like I said, it's basically the same thing, except I think this one is a 2012. Yeah, late model 2011, so it's 2012. But yeah, it's pretty much the same machine. This one has some transmission issues though. Yeah, doesn't look good in there. But I will tell you, after driving his, definitely motivates me to get mine running because those things are pretty fun to play around on. So the first thing we want to do, go ahead and start this thing up, let it warm up. That way the engine oil gets nice and warm and it drains out properly. Usually I just let it idle for a few minutes. We'll shut it off and then we'll start the oil change process. She's been idling for a few minutes. We'll shut her down. Throw our oil pan down. Now these older Can-Ams are known to have very small drain plugs and they're known to strip out. So we want to be very careful, torque it down properly. Doesn't look like it's been leaking, so that's a good sign. Certainly didn't seem over torqued, which is good. You know what? It actually is coming out a little hard, which is a sign of possibly damaged threads, but hopefully not. Let that drain out. Once that's all drained, we come in here and get our oil filter cap off. This bolt back here is a little hard to reach, but it's doable. And the other two can be reached with the power tool. Still got some oil draining out of there. Let's grab our oil filter. That hasn't been changed in a while. Once most of that's drained out, I'll come in here and wipe it clean. We'll spray the rest of that oil off after. Time for the new oil filter. That just goes in here. Don't want to get any contamination in there. Just like so. Install our cover back on there. And we can start putting our bolts in one by one. Remember to torque your bolts down. And we don't want to forget about the last hard to reach bolt. Now we got to install our drain plug. Always use a new copper crush washer. They're dirt cheap, and as long as you torque it down, you'll never have any issues. Speaking of torque, I forgot to mention it, but these are 89 inch-pounds for the oil filter cover. And the oil drain plug is going to be 15 foot-pounds or 180 inch-pounds. All right. Set our torque wrench to 180 inch-pounds. And that's it. It's not a lot. You do not want to go any further than that. If you tighten it too much, you'll risk stripping out the threads in that oil drain plug. I've actually had to replace a lot of these Can-Am engines between the 500s and the 800s, the earlier models, because they ran a smaller plug. The newer ones actually got a bigger plug and it helps out. If you end up stripping that, oil will start dripping out, and next thing you know, you lose all your oil, your engine's toast. So if you do strip that out, make sure you get it fixed. There's a couple different ways. You can either go with an oversized drain plug, or what I like to do is use a time cert. That way you can use the original drain plug in it still. Like I was saying, 2011 and older, they use the small drain plugs. The torque spec for that drain bolt is 15 foot-pounds. However, when you get up into the newer ones, they went with a bigger plug and it's a higher torque spec. So always check your service manual to make sure you're getting the right information. But if yours is a 2011, then that's the correct information right out of the service manual. Now, I believe, I want to say 2012, but it might be 13 when they changed that style plug So this one's right on the borderline, but it definitely has a smaller one. Now we're ready to throw some oil in it. Now these Rotax 800s have a few different ratings depending on what you're gonna run them in, what kind of temperature you're gonna run them in. Where I'm at, a 540 is perfect for this thing, and that's what I run in all my Can-Ams. There's no wet clutch system in here, so you don't have to get motorcycle-specific oil for these. You can run pretty much anything you want. I just make sure you're getting a quality oil. And they're gonna take 2.11 quarts, so you're gonna need 3 quarts of oil. We got just over 2 quarts in there. Reinstall our dipstick. Go ahead and fire it up. She doesn't need to run long. I just like the oil to get pumped up into everywhere. Then we can go ahead and shut it down. Just like so. Now to get the correct oil reading, let it sit for maybe a minute to 2 minutes. The oil will drain back down. We'll go ahead and pull this drain plug. Wipe it off. You know what I like about this? It says right on it, screw in for oil check. So perfect. Some machines you just seat it in, you don't screw it in to get the correct level. This says it right on the dipstick, you can't mess that up. So we'll go ahead, back in, screw it in, make sure it's nice and seated, pull it out, check our level. You can see we're a little low, we're right here. We should be in between these little hash marks. So we'll add just a little bit more. We don't want to overfill it. And it doesn't take much, so. And just like that, perfect. About 3/4 up to the hash marks there. Reinstall the dipstick. Now that the oil change is done, I had it running not too long ago, so our coolant's gonna be pretty hot. We gotta let that cool down, and then we'll start doing this radiator relocator kit. All right, now that I let this cool down for a minute, we can go ahead and drain that coolant. Go ahead, you can see it's starting to drain. The bolt's a little tricky to get to here without pulling plastics. But it is possible. As you can tell, it's not dripping out much. That's because it's airbound. I'll remove this front cover. Now, as soon as I crack this radiator cap, that'll start spewing everywhere, so we gotta watch it. Yeah, there she goes. Oop, a little too much. Making a mess. Once it's mostly drained, we can come in here and remove our radiator hoses. There's that one. Whoa. Then we can come on this side. We'll go ahead and do the same thing. I'm gonna unplug the power wire to the fan, just like so. There's only 2 bolts holding this radiator. They're up front here. Here's one. Now you need a 10mm wrench to get in here. Go ahead and pull that out of there. We'll come back around the side. Same thing. We got a little more room in here though. Pull that one out of there. I can back this up. Can go ahead and remove this vent hose. You might be able to sneak this out without removing this shield, but I find it's a lot easier if you do. It's a couple of push pins. Now we go ahead and pull it out of here. It's a little bit of a tight fit, but you can make it happen. And just like that. Now it might make it a little easier if you remove the fan, but it's doable without. Now we need to remove these 2 front rack bolts. Then this one. Now we can bring this radiator mount up here. Front ones get mounted first. Start these bolts. I'm not going to tighten down all the way yet. These rear bolts are a little trickier to get in, but they're doable. You know, I'm not exactly sure when I'm going to get to my Outlander 800, but hopefully fairly soon. I got a couple customers' jobs, doing a couple engine rebuilds right now. So those are going to take up some time. But maybe after those, I can get to some of my own stuff again. Whew. Almost be easier to take the rack off and do this. Now we can go ahead and tighten stuff down. So we do want to throw these rubbers back in the bottom of this radiator because they're going to mount in exactly how they were down there. So go right here. We're going to use the same hardware that held it in originally. And they were nice enough to actually have holes in here to get to the bolts. There's that. So we'll drill right here for our coolant hose. Gotta cut this back. Now we can run this coolant line up there. Get this hose up here. Snake her through just like that. Now we do have to extend this hose over here. So now that we got both our coolant hoses here, we can start hooking them up. This can go up into the upper one. This in the lower. Tighten our hose clamp up. Now you don't want to forget to plug in your 12-volt power wire to your fan. Now you don't have to extend the wire, but you do have to remove this clip here, and then it can be pushed up further. Run it up through here, and then you can plug it right in. And hook the clip right here. Now we might as well put our coolant plug back in. Once again, a nice tight spot to get to. Then we can tighten it up with an 8mm ratchet wrench, or any wrench. So you do have to extend this overflow hose here, because the original will not reach. So I'm actually going to lift this back up so I can put some antifreeze in it. It'll make it easier. Looks like that's about as far as I can go. Now we can add some coolant. Now that we've got her full, we'll start her up. Let it circulate through the system. There she goes. See it starting to go down? Now I know a lot of people do this or flush their coolant and they'll never bleed the bleeder screws here, and that's as long as you top off your coolant and get all the air out, that's fine. But a quick way to do it is to crack these bleeders right here. Right on top of the cylinder head, there's a thermostat in here. We can crack that screw right here. 8mm. See the air coming out of there? We'll wait until we stop bubbling before we tighten that back up. When we just start getting straight coolant out of there, that's when we're good. You don't actually need to take it all the way off, just crack it enough so the air can escape. So I don't hear any air anymore. It's pretty much just coolant starting to leak out of there, so I'll tighten that up. Should be good there. Give this thing a rinse afterwards. So now that we let some air out, you can see it's gone down quite a bit. Fill her back up. There's actually one on the rear cylinder as well. Right there. It'll just be a little easier if I pull the side panel off here. And we'll come over here, do the same thing. Yeah, hear that air? Just a little bit on this one though. Seems like it was just a little bit. Now we're just getting coolant, so we'll shut that. It does make a mess for sure. You just gotta be sure to clean it off with some water right afterwards so it doesn't make a sticky mess. And then again, we will top off our coolant. Probably throw our side panel back on. This thing really could use a new seat cover. I'll go ahead and fire this thing up again. Let the coolant circulate again. Give her a little throttle. Now we can drop this down. We'll bring her outside, test it out, make sure the fan's kicking on and off, and we should be good to go. Now that this is in place, we can bolt this down. This has wing nuts to make it a little easier to remove, so you can slide it up to clean it. Good old springtime in Vermont. 60 degrees one day, snow the next. Whew, I gotta get some gloves on. Let this thing sit and idle, wait for that fan to kick on. You can see the steam rolling off the radiator. I rinsed it off with water, that's why. There's that fan finally. It took a little while being this cold out. Make sure it cools off real quick. Plenty of airflow up here. Yep, there she goes. I'll let that fan kick on and off 3 times. She's working perfect. I think this thing's ready to go. Time to move on to the next project.